Three people are spotlit on a Zoom screen. Ōshin Jennings Sensei, a white man wearing monk's robes and an okesa. Tess Wenderski, a white femme-presenting person with brown hair in a bun and a green button-up long-sleeved top. And Liên Shutt Sensei, a Vietnamese American with a shaved head and wearing full robes and brown okesa. After the introduction, Ōshin is off-screen, leaving Lien, who is speaking, and Tess, who is interpreting, into ASL.
So I hand it over to Reverend Lien. So if you would please give her your full attention and a warm welcome.
Thank you, Ōshin Sama. I'm bowing. Thank you for the invitation to have me join your lovely Sangha. My name is Reverend Kiddu Lien Shutt. My pronouns are she and they. I'm zooming in from Ōshin Territory, otherwise known as West Oakland. I have my head shaved, about a week's worth of fuzz there from the full moon, week into this moon cycle. I have glasses, being Vietnamese American, I guess you would say I like to say maybe an olive complexion. Let's see, I have on my full robes. So a white jibon, a beige kimono, a black koromo, and then a brown okesa. I'm sitting in my office, which has mostly white walls. The print there, this says, "Enjoy your problems," a Suzuki Roshi quote. And a little altar over there. All right. And let's see, I want to change the view so I can see the full gallery. Well, again, thank you for having me. So, given the state of the world and the U.S. in particular, I've really been putting a lot of attention into what kind of share I can offer that supports us in these times. And I didn't realize, I know you probably told me you were going to be over here this month, but I didn't track it, Ōshin. So I didn't realize you were at a session. So actually, it's a great topic because I'm going to talk about silence. And in part is because I know in my world and internally and externally, there's a lot of talking, a lot of activity, a lot of what should I do, a lot of grief, a lot of internal and external dialogue about conditions of the world, and pausing. Stopping is certainly fundamental to our practice, and in that pause, in that stop, is to settle into silence. So that's what I want to talk about today. I'm going to start out with a quote from Katagiri Roshi in Returning to Silence in this section called Zen and Daily Life, and the section is called Silence. When we think about what real silence is, we have to look at it from two angles. The first is to see silence through human eyes, and the second is to see silence through Buddha's eyes, or the universal eye. The opportunity to experience real silence occurs when we have been driven into a corner and simply cannot move an inch. This seems like a situation of complete despair, but this silence is quite different from despair. because in the area of despair, the conscious flame of human desire is still burning. But real silence is a state of human existence that passes through this despair. How can we experience this silence? Without everyday life, it is impossible to experience silence. So he does go on in this section to talk about the human perspective as having what he calls 3 flavors: pessimistic, optimistic, and mystical. I'm not going to go through those. I really appreciate the of silence, because it does feel to, in the beginning part here, because it does feel to me that we are stuck in the corner, so to speak, about what's going on in our world. And I'm offering you 5 things about silence, certainly not an exhaustive list. These are just things I've thought about, and perhaps in his framing I would say 4 are the human, and maybe it's one way of the movement from human to the universal. And as he says here, which I appreciate, you can't have one without the other. Huh? That's our life. That's where we live. So the first I want to offer is what we call the silence of intentional quiet. This is what sesshin is. We move into the container of silence when we go into retreat, when we go into sesshin. This is why it's in remote places. Of course, we practice noble silence, and in silence, it's easier to notice awareness itself, for one, and also the subtleties of what's going on. And of course, in the teachings, seclusion is a big part of our practice. And in seclusion, we renunciate or we relinquish. So it's not just when we enter the container of a sesshin, we are using our agency to intentionally move into that container. So how I'm framing this today is both a key and a container. So in this silence of quiet, it's the key is renunciation and seclusion. And that's a really useful thing these days in particular, because I know, at least, I'm not on social media very much, but I know that many of my students, struggle with just being on their phone, especially following the news and at times I've been there. 10 days ago in Minneapolis, I certainly was, many of us probably was just trying to figure out what's really happening. So to disengage from that so that we move back into what's happening here, so that we can find some settledness and groundedness before we move into action, be it in our own daily life or to interact in some way to meet the conditions of the world. So to me, we renunciate by moving into a container of less stimulus, and that doesn't commitment. Sesshin is a commitment to being fully present. To be right here and right now. Not wondering about what activity, because I know for me also there's so much energy towards what do I need to do? What do we need to do? Next is the silence of reflection. Many traditions, religious traditions in particular, have reflection, have contemplation, prayer, what we would call, or Edward Kanzi would call, this part I would call reflective wisdom. So when we enter the container of silence, that another form of the silence is then we reflect. You know, in the Eightfold Path, which we don't talk about very much in Zen, but I like to combine insight and Zen, or Thervan and Zen. You know, the Eightfold Path, should I say a little more specifically about it? Yes? Would that be useful? All right. So the Eightfold Path, of course, is the fourth of the Four Noble Truths. And while there are 8 factors, they're broken into 3 sections, what's called the wisdom section, the ethical conduct, and then the meditative conduct. Sorry, I'm adding this. I didn't put in the notes there. So the wisdom section is skillful understanding or skillful view, and that is of the Four Noble Truths and karma. And then the other aspect of the wisdom section is skillful thinking, or better translation these days is intention or motivation, because thinking is never passive. It becomes beliefs, and they give us a drive into action. So wisdom in the classic layering of the 3 sections moves us into the interactive part, right? Sila, the skillful speech, skillful action, skillful livelihood. I like to call it the compassionate connection. But from our values and our motivation, our beliefs and motivation, we move into interaction with others and the world. And the 3rd section is called the meditative or samadhi section. And it's skillful effort, skillful mindfulness, and skillful concentration. Now, Gil Fronsdal, who started it out in Zen and now mostly teach insight, I'm studying with him, and he says that the meditative quality is actually the bridge between our wisdom, or our sense of framing of the world, and our motivations and our activity. So we meditate or the meditative qualities support us to really reflect on, am I living according to my values, or am I enacting my values in activity in daily life? I find that really useful, to slow things down, so to speak. So we want to, the key here in reflection is not just think about whatever you want to think, because we already do that, don't we? So it's very much directed, paying attention in a directed way. Maybe blasphemous, but I like to think, in the Fukan Zazengi, I like to say it's think of not thinking. This is the part where we think so we don't think discursively. We skillfully apply our thinking, our thoughts, by investigating how we think, not what we think so much. Not that that's not important, mind you. I'm not saying that at all. But the practice here is very much to notice our processes of thinking, our patterns of thinking. And by thinking, I should also say here that it's, of course, tied in with our emotions and our sensations. You know, I know that often when I feel despair, I have noticed a pattern in myself that when I have despair, if I pay more attention, beneath that is frustration, and beneath that is sadness. So I'm really sad about the condition of the world, but where I, not really massage, maybe more like chew, is the, is all that frustration, and then I collapse into despair. So I know that that's kind of a pattern. Now when I feel deep despair, one way to lift myself, by that I mean bring in some energy and bring in some wisdom from knowing this pattern, is what am I really frustrated about? And then also, how do I take care of my sadness? So this is a part in which we also really examine how the influence of our past and what is it now. You know, I remember I was at Tassajara in my second or fourth, I can't remember, whichever practice period I was in 2003 when the U.S. invaded Iraq, right, and the Iraq War started. And, you know, Linda Ruth Cutts was leading that practice period. And so, you know, it's a thing in practice period where they could try to decide whether to tell you what's going on in the world or not. But this is a big thing. So she did tell us, and then a way to work with it was we had periods of zazen later into the night. She told us like in the evening, so that it was optional for us to go sit together. And there were just a few of us. She was in there, and I really appreciate that. But for me, being Vietnamese, you know, I grew up in Vietnam, and I remember the Tet Offensive. I was 4 years old. And so for me, it was really actually fearful. There was a lot of fear. It did bring up for me resonance from the past. And I had to really remember, right, different conditions and to honor my fear and what came up for me, and at the same time remember this is a different context. I'm in a safe place. Am I safe now? What is the current condition? Yes, I have patterns, and what's the truth of my experience now? So we honor our experience and we place it in, you know, we well know with trauma that we need to stay in present time. A lot of trauma is about living in past time. And so a lot of the practice is to be present and remember that and anchor ourselves here. So skillful reflection. So for me, the key then is to pay attention in a directed way. Again, think of not thinking. To know our stories, our patterns of thinking as ours, and then the container is this container of self-practice. How do I tend to myself, be it in body, heart, or mind? That moves us into the silence of deep listening. As I understand, this is something that Thich Nhat Hanh introduced the West to, as I understand it. And so I wanted to read what he has to say. This is from The Heart of the Buddha's Teachings by Thich Nhat Hanh, of course, under right or skillful speech. Deep listening is the foundation of right speech. If we cannot listen mindfully, we cannot practice right speech. No matter what we say, it will not be mindful because we'll be speaking only our own ideas and not in response to the other person. In the Lotus Sutra, we are advised to look and listen with the eyes of compassion. Compassionate listening brings about healing. When someone listens to us in this way, we feel some relief right away. A good therapist always practices deep, compassionate listening. We have to learn to do the same in order to heal the people we love and restore communication with them. When communication is cut off, we all suffer. When no one listens to us or understands us, we become like a bomb ready to explode. Restoring communication is an urgent task. Sometimes only 10 minutes of deep listening can transform us and bring a smile back into our lips. The Bodhisattva Kuan Yin is the one who hears the cries of the world. She has the quality of listening deeply without judging or reacting. When we listen with our whole being, we can diffuse a lot of bombs. If the other person feels we are critical of what they are saying, their suffering will not be relieved. When psychotherapists practice right listening, their patients have the courage to say things they have never been able to tell anyone before. Deep listening nourishes both speaker and listener. So the key here is to receive fully. I like to equate it to Dogen's, from the Genjo Koan, where he says, if you think you go, I'm paraphrasing, if you think you go in the world to experience the mirrored things, that's delusion. That the mirrored things reveal themselves, that's enlightenment. So this deep listening as a practice, do I need to explain what deep listening is? Would that be helpful? Deep listening practice, two people and one person just listens. And, I actually add a little more where you don't nod, you don't shake your head, you don't respond, because we pick up cues. Like I'm trying to pick up cues right now from you all, right? It's very hard speaking to a Zen group, because they're all like, and nobody moves, When I speak at other places, they're like, So we're always picking up cues, aren't we? And then we direct what we want to say there. So in deep listening, it's just the gift of receiving. Just the gift of receiving. That's hard practice. So also for the other person, it's the talker even called deep listening. It's a way in which you can say your full story. Because again, when we speak, we're looking for cues so that we respond to that, right? I like to do it a little bit longer than people think. I'm teaching a second part of a beginner meditation course now with Zen Center. And we just had our first class last week. And right away, after, a little intro, I had them pair off to talk about how I suffer for 7 minutes each, And people struggle with that. And it was really interesting because I've been teaching this course for over 15 years. And a lot of the response, and I offer that you can talk about the content for yourself, not the other person's content, of course, or the process. And usually the feedback when we talk about it afterward is, oh, it's very hard not to respond to the other person, or what do you mean how I suffer, And I try to speak for the full 7 minutes. You can say, I don't know, but don't just sit there in silence. And a lot of people have a hard time. What can I say? Or it's usually they can go on, or they're like, I don't know how to talk about my suffering. And that's part of the point. But it's really interesting. This last week, right away, and I think it's because that we have been listening to the cries of the world. How can we not? The situation in our country and the world is really at a height of suffering. And so much was people saying, I really am listening deeply to the other. And, there was a lot more discussion about how, gosh, I have a hard time being compassionate towards myself. And when I listen to myself, right, I am pulling up, oh yeah, I can have self-compassion. Or the other thing is, as I'm talking about my suffering, and then as I listen to another suffering, I realize the similarity. So compassion is there, and I don't feel so alone. So deep listening is a practice that's always in relation to others. Yes, we can listen to ourselves without doubt. Sometimes I say Zazen is deep listening, as you sit there and of course you hear so many things that go over and over. But in terms of the practice of deep listening, it is to interact with others. And in that, compassion or connection happens when we can receive fully. So it's a container of support to practice with the self in relationship to others. You could say a container to receive others and what they have to share as a gift. You know, the perfect example, because I'm trying to give you an example that has to do with difficulty in meeting that, is for any of you ever listened to Blanche in the past, she likes to tell the story about how during the Vietnam War she was an activist. And one time, you know, she was on the front line there at a rally, and a cop started beating up people. So she went under the, you know, whatever, and tried to put her body in. Then she said she made direct eye contact with a cop. And in that moment, she realized his humanness. Before, he was just, you know, the bad cops. She said it shifted her sense of how she social justice. Before, she felt she had a lot of hatred, and now she wanted to work towards peace. And she said, how do I do this? And that's when she really went searching for a teacher, and met Suzuki Roshi, and we could really experience that. So deep listening is a practice of being with fully. And I know I wanted to give examples of, you know, interaction with the world, but I have to tell you the story. My girlfriend, yesterday, she's a videographer. She was filming for a group 3 dog rescue places, right? And she was at this place, and she said they had all these dogs, and what they have this program in which young kids come and read to the dogs. They read to the dogs. I thought, oh, that's cute. And then she says, because dogs do not correct the children. You know, usually when children are learning how to read, you know, we're like, no, pronounce that wrong, you know, it's like this, it's like that. But of course, dogs, I don't know, maybe they do, but it's just a bark. Most of us do not understand dog language. So what the person was sharing, the director, whoever it was that these children reading comprehension and reading level went up because they were met with deep listening. This is my spin on this second part, right? But, right? I'm not amazing. I mean, that's a really great example of how deep listening is healing. That's why I had to share it. Like, I mean, she just told me last night, right? So, right, isn't it? That's a great example. So just be a dog next time someone talks to you, right? Just receive like a dog. And you know, dogs are like, they pay attention. Cats are like, whatever you're saying, I'm not interested. But dogs are like, right? Yeah? So, next we move to the silence of conviction or faith. The silence that comes from experience and the confidence that comes with it. The key is trust, faith. You know, I like to, faith is a one for many people. So I like to say that faith these days, how, you know, I would say one way to approach faith is that it is strengthened confidence. Strengthened confidence. That's how we build faith. From experience, from a sense of resting in. Since we're talking about, or there's reference to sesshin, maybe you don't remember when you first started meditation. Since I teach beginning meditation, especially January and February, it always that learning of supporting people that, as Suzuki Roshi said, it could take like 6 months before you find your seat, your posture. And yet when we have practiced enough and we put ourselves into our seat, our posture, isn't there like a resting? I don't put words to it as, I am faithful here, I am strength and confidence, but the feeling of it is just like a resting into the silence of like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? Is this, how do I look? If they still come up, the thoughts, but you just rest back into the confidence of taking the posture of awakening. And that you're doing your best and you're just here with it. Perhaps it's also this conviction of that things, while they may seem not what we want them to be now, the bigger picture, right, is that things work themselves out. Maybe that's going far, but it's certainly a bit more like patience for what is to come. To me, a lot of practice is we're building our capacity to be with dukkha, with difficulty. We don't have to fix it. We don't have to do anything. In Zazen, we are just with what is. So it's that empowering of ourselves and others to have some confidence. Perhaps you could think of it as the bigger picture or the long game, and not just the short game. Not just what's happening now, but trust and faith. Not just 10 minutes into a 40-minute period, but you will survive to the end. And perhaps even thrive to the end. Trust and confidence in that. So the container is to know your story as not your story, right? Whereas in reflection, we really are working with our story and our patterns. Here, to me, faith, we kind of set that down. It's not that we don't know it and we don't validate it or we don't understand its importance, but there's enough conviction of centeredness here of this story is part of a bigger story of my life or of the world. There's space here, there's rest here. To me, that's actually the trust of strength and confidence, very empowering, When I talk about the third noble truth, which I, by the way, call the good news of Buddhism, right? That the ending of suffering is possible. That's empowerment. It is possible. That's empowering ourselves. And then I call it the last one here, the silence of just listening. Just listening. Letting sound be sounds, seeing as seeing, taste as taste, thought as thought, like in an endless sky. We could say the key is the stillness of non-doing. By the way, stillness here doesn't mean there's no movement, right? Your heart's beating, blood is flowing, a little adjustment, if you're slumping, lifting up. And yet, it's not, again, similar to before, right? Maybe it's more in that resting of trusting that resting. Before, I'm still practicing faith and trusting. Here, I'm resting in the confidence, resting in the faith. It's also a stillness that's not outside of human experience. Similar to what category Roshi was talking about. It's not separate from our life. It's just listening, just being. It's the trust and faith and resting in that thriving is also here. I know that for many of us, especially if we have any traumatic background or experiencing trauma as we are now in conditions, sometimes it's hard to just be. So here, remember I say I have a key and a container. This one I say I have no container. No container. Perhaps we could call this non-thinking. Right? Think of not thinking, non-thinking. Then not self also. Interestingly, of course, the not self, again, isn't dropping, well, we could say dropping, but it isn't that you don't have stories. It's that your story is part of life. It's not part of life. And also that you have many stories. It's one story does not define you, nor another, nor a group of people. This is opening us up to all the possibilities. So there's no container. I'll end with Category Roshi here. And it's a little bit long, but stay with me. Did I give you the... Oh no, here it is. Yep, I think let me go get the book, because I think I gave you the wrong page. And since I made copies for you, I thought this was it, but I think I might have given you the wrong page here. Hang on. Or I cut it off and I can't find it. Oh, it is here. I just cut off the... Okay, I'm going to start at silence means. Okay? So it's a little long, folks, but stay with me. Silence means, how do we take care of the usual aspects of human life? This is important. For instance, if Zazen makes us sleepy, that is because of our attitude towards Zazen. If we are lazy or have an unconscious dislike toward Zazen, then very naturally, we can easily sleep in Zazen. The point is how we deal with this human problem. We have to taste the bitterness of sleeping in Zazen. But also we can still taste something great and optimistic through sleeping in Zazen. due to having slept in Zazen for a long time, someday we can wake up. Someday we can have pretty good Zazen. Our basic attitude is that we shouldn't be tossed away by sleeping in Zazen and by the expectation of good Zazen. Our life must be rooted on earth, not in sleep. This is not a particular technique. It is silence. That's it. Silence means you have to be you as you really are. What is just is of itself. I'll just say that again. Love these little Zen writings, huh? What is just is of itself. If we want to know real spiritual life, we have to taste ourselves as we really are. It is not necessary to stick to the forms and rituals. We can like them though. That's my part. All we have to do is taste ourselves as we are. In terms of the Buddha's eyes, silence is the total manifestation of our whole personality, in which we have digested the three flavors of optimism, pessimism, and mysticism. They never come up because they're all digested. They become just energy for us. This silence is quite different from the silence in terms of human eyes. According to human eyes, there is a vague, disconsolate pain or pensiveness in the depths of our life that we cannot wipe out. It is very sticky, and we stumble over it pretty easily. It is beyond our consciousness or unconsciousness. It is already here. Oh, there. I like my here. It is already there. But in terms of the Buddha's eyes or Zen teaching, silence is exactly the total manifestation of our whole personality. Whole personality means our individual personality is manifested with the whole universe. All other beings are the contents of our personality. So when we manifest our whole personality, it is not just our individual personality, but simultaneously, through this personality, we can feel the whole universe. This is why we can feel magnanimity, tolerance, and compassion. I like to say to my students that fundamentally our practice is the stop. Anytime they come and say, I say, oh, just stop. Pause if you can't stop. Right? And shamatha meditation is stopping meditation for calm and abiding. Literally means dwelling in tranquility. The tranquility of silence. From silence, from here, the chances of meaningful and respectful engagement, be it within ourselves, with others, or the world, is more likely. Thank you for listening.